All right, my friends, we find ourselves on Memhe Amebez on 45B. You know, have like all this stuff on the table here. Tali did some project at school of like making like a not dishwasher, you call it, like a dryer or something for laundry. So everything's cluttered over the table over here. Okay, so we are hopefully going to be maybe not permanently, but we're going to be continuing, not wrapping up, I guess. We're going to continue our discussion about the Hoshanas. The Hoshanas are brought particularly on Hoshana Rabbah, though not limited to that. We are going to have a very esoteric tangent, which will take up a good chunk of the Gemara tonight, talking about actually, it's interesting. Tonight's Gemara, we're going to have a statement in here, which is the source for the notion of the Lamed Vav Tzadikim, of the 36 Tzadikim in every generation. So this is one of the sources for that here in tonight's Gemara. So keep an eye out for that. We'll talk a little bit about some theological issues. And then toward the end, we'll get back into our featured presentation talking about Sukkah and Lulav, which our Masechta is about Sukkah and Lulav, so it makes sense we'll get back to that. All right, so we're at the words Amar Chizkiah. Amar Chizkiah, it is roughly 7 lines down, probably still the first page in Art Scroll, okay? 45b, Memhem Beis. Amar Chizkiah, Amar Yirmiyah Mishum Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. I'm going to preempt. Someone's going to ask me. There's going to be a lot of weird, not weird, but seemingly disconnected ideas tonight. The reason is because we are quoting Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai right now. And once we start citing Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we don't stop, or not immediately at least. So that's what will take us on a tangent. So what did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai say? Kol ha-mitzvos kulan ein adam yotzi behen ela derech gedilasan. The way you are yotze mitzvos is they have to be positioned in the direction that they grow. Shenemar atze shitim omdim. So those the cedar wood that they would use for the beams in the base in the Mishkan, so that had to be standing up. They have to be standing up in the direction that they grow. This is pertinent for us because that's how we're yotzi the mitzvah of the Arba Minim. That's why just a moment before making the bracha, we actually hold the esrog upside down because then it's not derech gedilasan, so we have not been yotzi the mitzvah yet. Then we make the bracha over La Siyatsan, just a moment before being Yotze, flip over the esrog, and boom, we're Yotze the mitzvah. So if you ever wonder why we do that, now you know. Here's the Makor and the Gemara. But once we are on here, we just give some alternative drushos, not mutually exclusive though. Davar acher, omdim shemamidin es tzipuyan. That the way they would basically be attached, the gold plates would be resting on top of them rather than on the ground. Meaning that's what it means that they are standing on them. Davar acher, and a final interpretation. What does omdim mean? It means like standing waiting. Shema Tomar Avad Sivra Mubatal Sikuyan. Maybe we've lost all hope and any possibility of ever recovering them. Tamalomar Atze Shitim Omdim She'omdim La'olam La'ome Olamim. That the Atze Shitim will stand forever. There's probably two main ways to understand this. One is that will somewhere in the world they are hidden and they'll be recovered. They still physically exist. Or it could be referring to the parallel metaphysical correlative in Shemayim that there's supposed to be a Beis Hamikdash in the metaphysical realm, and so its corresponding metaphysical manifestation is still intact. Okay, and as I mentioned, once we brought in Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Gemara is like, oh, well, we have all sorts of fun esoteric things that we could learn from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So let's go down that rabbit hole for a little bit. V'amar Chizkiah Rabbi Yirmiyah Mishum Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Yachol ani liftor eskolm kulo min hadim miyom shenivresi anata. On my own, I have the power to save the world from judgment from the day I was born until now on my merit. You'll notice, I'm sure someone goes into explain this. He was very confident in his personal righteousness and of those around him. V'yalmale Elazar beni imi miyam shnivra olam v'anakshav. And if we add Elazar beni, if we were to add him, my son Elazar to the mix, we'd be able to, our merits would be able to atone for all the sins from the creation of the world until now. V'amale Yosef ben Uziyahu imanu aved. Yosef ben Uziyahu with us. Miyam shenivar olam ad sofo. Together, we'd be able to carry all the sins from the world, from creation until the very end. There's probably some deeper esoteric meaning behind this, but clearly it's a statement of their individual and collective righteousness. But we go further down the rabbit hole. V'amar Chizkiah Rabbi Yirmiyah Mishum Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Ra'isi b'nei aliyah v'hemuaten. Aliyah here is not what we colloquially call aliyah, meaning like moving to Israel. It means like just b'nei aliyah are people who are exceedingly righteous. Now, Rav Moshe Sternbach, in his tshuva that he has about whether there's a chiyuv to move to Eretz Yisrael, he has a formulation that goes something like you should make sure that if you're making aliyah, it should be an aliyah kipshuto. That it shouldn't just be a physical aliyah, but you should make sure that it's a spiritual aliyah as well. So if you ever hear B'nai Aliyah, so that's where it's from. Now, im elefhain, if there are 1,000, ani ubni mehen, myself, my son, we are counted among them. And me'ahem, if there's only 100 B'nai Aliyah, ani ubni mehen, my son and I are still with them. And im shnaimheim, if there's only two, ani ubni hein, it's me and my son. We are the only B'nai Aliyah. Now the Gemara says, "Umi zutre kulehai." The Gemara doesn't challenge Raishir Reichai's self-assessment. It just says we think there's a few more righteous people out here than you're leading us on to. Is it really true that there's so few righteous people anymore? Amar Rava Timnisre Alfi Dara Havu de Kameda Kucha Brichu Shnemar Saviv Shmona Esar Elef. So there are 18,000 rows of different righteous people. That's a lot of people, a lot of righteous people, a lot more than just Rashi Baruch and his son. So why are they selling us short? So Lokashia, the answer is there's righteous people and there's righteous people. There's different levels of tzidkus. So the mistakli ba'aspaklaria ha'me'ira. It's a fun word. Ha de lo mistakli ba'aspaklaria ha'me'ira. Some are looking through a lightened, clear looking glass, I think is the right rendering of it. What's the official Art Scroll rendering of the term? Looking glass or something like that?
Screen, a clear
Screen. Okay, it's close. And some don't have one that is particularly lightened. That's harder to see through. That's opaque. So that's the answer. There's those 18,000 people. So they have like a more, less clear, less direct line to God. But yes, they are very righteous. Are you saying that there's so few people who could see directly toward the divine? This is the line right here. Lo pachos alma mitlosin v'shisa tzadiki demekavli ap ishchina b'chol yom. There's no less than 36 tzadikim who are able to accept the divine presence every day. Shenemar ashrei kol chochelo. Lo, you have to read it as 36. Lamed vav b'gematria tlosin v'shisa havu. So this is the idea of the Lamed Vavnikim, if you ever heard of that. Ever hear that? Right? I think all the people who are like Karbach followers are really into that. But Karbach didn't make that up. It's right here in the Gemara.
We had one in our community,
Who was that?
Erwin Niederberg.
Dr. Wilson.
Okay.
I'll add Erwin to the list. So here we go. So it was there were some things that Karbach probably did make up, but this wasn't one of them. So here's the source in the Gemara. So the question is, okay, it sounds like there's 36 righteous people at any given time who should seemingly have a direct line to God. So lo kasha ha dayole bebar ha dayole below bar. There are those who can think about like Esther Hamalka who wants to come in to see the king, right? There are those who could come in with willy-nilly with rishus, Rashi says, with permission. And there are those who have to knock on the door first and get an appointment with the king. So again, I didn't go through like the Maharsha and Maharal on this, but I would not be surprised if you look at the different Mefarshim on Agadita. I'm sure they delve into this. What we will be delving deeper into is the end of the Gemara today, in which we get into the bracha of Shechianu. That particularly interested me the most, so that's what I decided to look into. We have a Tosus coming up, so brace yourselves. It's not a particularly complicated Tosus, though. Okay, back to the Gemara. So we are done with esoteric land from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai for now, right? I mean, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as I'm sure you're familiar, right? Went into the cave and is purportedly the author of the Zohar, though we're not going down that rabbit hole of authorship questions. So he's a mystical guy. All right, back to our feature presentation. Quoting from our Mishnah, "V'shas piti rasa mahein omrim." So if you look back at our Mishnah back on Mem Hey and Aleph, you could glance back or you could just listen to me. Um, at the end of the Mishnah, it describes what happened at the end of Hoshana Rabbah, right? So, okay, we finished davening, hopefully in less than hour and a half. And the question is, like, everyone's like, well, what do I do? What do I do now? So most people are halfway out the door at that point. But actually, there's one more thing we have to say before we go. Let's see, the line in the Mishnah was, they would say, why am I not seeing it? Hmm. Here it is. They would say, Yofi lecha mizbeach, Yofi lecha mizbeach. It was was one opinion. The other opinion was leka ulecha mizbeach, to Hashem and to you mizbeach, leka ulecha mizbeach. Seemingly praise be to Hashem and praise be to the mizbeach. Now, what troubles you about that? Pretty sure there's only one person, one being we're supposed to be worshiping, right? That trouble any of you when we first read it? Well, if it didn't, it should now, because the Gemara picks up on that. Okay. So the Gemara continues. Wait, but that means you are combining God with something else. Vitanya, kol hameshatif shem shemayim v'davar acher neker mina olam shemar bilti lashem levado. Anyone who tries to combine God with some other being, you should be uprooted from the world. There's a whole side discussion about this is worthy of a whole shiur. Maybe we've even done it in the past about Christianity. Is Christianity avodah zarah? So there's another Tosos, and Tosos, depending how you interpret it, seems to say that Goyim, Jews, are not allowed to do shituf, but Goyim are not held accountable on that. So Christians, they have the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, right? And they'll take the last train for the coast, the day of the music. Okay, that was my little bit of Amer. Anyone get the reference? No one knows the American Pie song? No, this is like way after your time. No, this is in early 2000s. Okay, so anyway, you don't have to know the
McLean
song
was
to know about
the
the
singer.
what?
McLean.
Don McLean?
Don McLean, yeah.
Yeah. Was he a one-hit wonder? Or did he have other songs that people were
He
into?
had one with the guy that cut off his ear. What's his name?
Guy cut off his ear.
Van Gogh.
What did Toby say?
Van Gogh.
Yeah.
That's an artist. Cut off his
Some
ear.
others.
I'd say something like Ozzy Osbourne, but I don't think
American Pie was like a 10-minute song.
Yeah, my one of my friends back in eighth grade in middle school, he would call them Agadita songs. Oh, the Gemara here would appreciate that. It's like, it's like when there's like a story, it's like, oh, it's like an Agadita song. Anyway, okay. I digress. But the whole thing is this question about Christianity. Are they really avodah zarah? Maybe it's just shituf. While a Jew can't do it, maybe it's okay for goyim. So the Gemara here is not worried about goyim right now. We're worried about Jews keeping halacha. Jews are not allowed to do shituf according to anyone. So the question is, what's going on over here? So we have to make an ukimta. Hachi kamrile. This is really what we're saying here. Anachnu modim Ulecha anu mishabchin. To Hashem, we acknowledge him as God. We thank him and acknowledge him as God. And to you, the Mizbeach, we praise you for being a medium for worship of God. Laka anachnu modim, laka anu mikalsin. Similar idea to you, we acknowledge as our God, and to you we praise as the vehicle for serving Hashem. And I just noticed there's a different girsa here. Dagosa gra says mevarchim, bless. Okay, so that's the answer. The answer is that we're not actually being mishatef the mizbeach with God as its own as a deity, and it says like wide implications. I think every year around Slichos time, I bring up Machnise Rachamim, the prayer which seems like intercessory prayer, or I don't have to go so far. Think about Friday nights, Barchuni L'Shalom. Moshe Feinstein's father refused to say Barchuni L'Shalom because, and he wasn't the only one, because you're asking the angels to bless you. But wait, we're supposed to ask Hashem to bless us. We're not supposed to have intermediaries. That is how Avodah Zarah began, and it's Avodah Zarah. All right, so we'll leave that for a longer shiur, but that was a little piece in the Gemara there about that sugya. Okay, for our final section tonight, you might recall that in our Mishnah there was this opinion that they didn't go around with aravos for Hoshanas, but they took the leaves of the palm tree. I guess presumably once they were opened a little bit more, not like the lulavim that we use. But basically, yeah, they used essentially what were lulavim. So Amar Rav Huna, my time with Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. This was the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. But the question is, why would he think we would use a lula? We would use leaves of the palm tree rather than using the aravos. So one opinion is that's based on an interpretation of the pasuk. Dichsiv kapos shnaim. It says kapos tamarim. Why kapos in plural? So achas alula va'achas hamizbeach. One as a reference to the lulav, but the plural form as a reference to a second bringing of the lulav for the purposes of encircling the mizbeach. However, the main opinion for Rabbanan Amri, Kaposksiv, they would reject this drasha because the way it's spelled in the Torah is that it's chaser, it's not malay. There's no vav. The vav does not, even though we would read it as kapos when laning, the way it's actually written in the Torah is chaser without the vav, so there's no room to make a drasha for plural. Okay. But there is a second opinion as to where Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka gets his source. It's not from the pasuk, but it's from a svara. And this is funny because what we're about to read sounds like a Shabbos morning drasha idea, but actually has halachic ramifications, which is always interesting. Reb Levi Omer kitamar, like the date. Ma tamar zeh ein lo el leiv echad. Just as the tamar only has one heart. Yisrael elam el leiv echad lavim shemayim. So to Jewish people, we have one unified heart in serving our Father in heaven. So that's where he gets the idea from. So if you go to a palm tree, all the sap, the heart, which is considered the heart of the tree, is like stored in one place as opposed to being spread throughout all the different branches. So that's the idea that the heart is all together. All right, it's a nice drasha. We don't paskin like that though. I don't know if it's fundamentally disregarding the idea that we could use a svara like this. I mean, this is the interesting part. Actually, it just occurred to me. When we had a proof from the pasuk, we need to ask, well, how would the chachamim interpret the pasuk differently? Here, where it's just like a nice svara, the chachamim are like, we don't even need to reckon with this. It's a cute drasha. It makes for a nice Saturday morning sermon. But that's not going to persuade us to change the halachic practice. So maybe that's why they didn't even have to reply to this idea. Moving forward, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Lulav Shiva. Okay, so we're gonna have three different opinions here about do you have to make a bracha every day on the lulav and on the sukkah? So three different permutations. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Lulav Shiva, v'sukkah yom echad. You have to make a separate bracha on the lulav all 7 days. But the sukkah, you only have to make one bracha from the beginning. My taima, why would it be so? Lulav de mefaski leilos miyamim kol yoma mitzvah ba'ape nafshehu. Because since lulav can only be brought during the daytime, effectively the nighttime makes a hefsek, a separation between each and every day. So each every day is a distinct unit requiring a distinct bracha. Sukkah delo mefaski leilos miyamim kulu shiva kechad yoma arichahu damu. This might sound familiar from Rosh Hashanah, that since Sukkah is a mitzvah day and night, one could possibly suggest that if I make one bracha on the first night of Sukkot, that bracha will carry me over all the way till the end of Sukkot. I don't need to make one initial bracha. We don't paskin this way, just in case you were wondering. That's opinion number one. Yes. Yeah, so don't, in case all of a sudden, you don't zone out at this point. It's not how we paskin. Two other opinions, or one opinion with two branches coming out of it. Rabbi Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Bar Chana understands Rabbi Yochanan said, Sukkah shivav luv yom echad. The opposite. A sukkah requires a distinct bracha throughout the 7 days, and a lulav only requires on the first day one bracha. My time, and now what's the logic here? Sukkah doraisa shiva lulav derabanan sagle b'chad yoma. So sukkah, which is a mitzvah midoraisa throughout, that requires a bracha all the days. But a lulav, which is really only fundamentally a mitzvah on the first day, but then the Rabbanan extended to the other days, so therefore maybe one bracha would suffice, since the extension of it is only d'Rabbanan in nature. Maybe something of a lower obligation wouldn't require an extra bracha for it. And then the third opinion is, this might sound more familiar, Ki asa Rabban Amar Rabbi Yochanan, echad zeh v'echad zeh shiva. You make a new bracha on the sukkah each day, you make a new bracha on the lulav each day. And when we say a new bracha on the sukkah, by the way, it doesn't just mean once a day necessarily, but we'll see very soon that if there's a hefsek, if you leave your sukkah, you go inside and you're basically done with the sukkah, and then you sit down to another meal, then you make a new leishev basukkah, assuming you are is whole machlokas, but let's just say, for argument's sake, being kovea suda inside the sukkah once more. Amar Rav Yosef, nekot Rav Amar Chana biyadecha to kula morei kayame kavase b'sukkah. So Rav Yosef says we paskin like Rabba Bar Chana's interpretation, at least vis-a-vis sukkah. Certainly, we could all get on board that sukkah requires a separate mitzvah every single day. However, this seems to be challenged by the following brisa, Meisvei. This brings us on to Memvav Amid Aleph. Ha'osa lulav la'atzmo. Omer baruch shechianu v'kimanu v'ginu l'zman hazeh. We'll discuss this next week, but this is also a halacha we don't do today. So if this sounds weird, if you never made a shechianu for when putting together your sukkah or putting together your lulav, not when you first take lulav, but when you put it together. Well, just ignore this a little bit. I mean, don't actually ignore, but don't do it lemaisa. So also live la'atz was someone who puts together the lulav for himself. Omer bar shechianu v'kimanu v'ginu l'zman hazeh. You make a bracha of shechianu. Not low, and when you take it, let's say to fill the mitzvah. Omer baruch asher kisham mitzvah tzivanu al netilas lulav. You then make that bracha of netilas lulav. The av al pisha berach alav yom rishon chozim over kol shiva. Now notice over here. It says you don't just make a bracha on day one, you make a bracha all 7 days on the lulav. This is the opposite of what Rabbi Yochanan said. And then the brisa talks about sukkah. It's going to be the opposite as well. Ha'osa sukkah la'atzmo, omer baruch shechianu v'kimanu v'ginu l'zman hazeh. Then nichnas leishev ba, when someone goes to sit in the sukkah, omer asher kisham mitzvah tzivanu leishev basukkah. You make a leishev. And then here's the key point: Ukevan sheberach yom rishon shuv eno avarich. But once you make a bracha on the first day, you don't need to make any more brachos. Kasha luv kasha sukkah sukkah. So this is the issue, because if we're paskening like Rav Yochanan said, you make a bracha on the sukkah all 7 days. You only make a bracha on the lulav the first day. Here the brisa is telling us the opposite, saying you make a bracha on the lulav all 7 days, and you only make a bracha on the sukkah the first day. So we have a contradiction on the lulav front and the sukkah front. So how do we reconcile them? Let's do lulav first. Bish lama lulav lulav kasha. Kam bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim. Kam bisman she'ein beis hamikdash kayim. The difference is whether during the times when the Bryce is saying when the Beis Hamikdash was around, then they would make a bracha on the lulav every. Right, they would make a bracha on it every single day. The kam is bisman she'ein Beis Hamikdash kayim. But here it's talking about when the Beis Hamikdash is not around. And then Ela Sukkah Kasha. Now, how we reconcile Sukkah? Tanaihi. Well, it's actually Machlokes Tanaim. The Tanya. Tefillin kol zman shmanichem mevarich aleihen. So for tefillin, as long as you are wearing them, every time you put it on, you have to make a bracha. Divrei Rebbe. You only make one bracha at the beginning of the day, and that's it. So Rebbe says every time, if you take off your tefillin, let's say to go use the facilities, or just you take it off, you're gonna go, take a walk and come back 30 minutes later or something and put it back on. So that's a hefsek, and so you need to make a new bracha. So the same logic applies to a sukkah as well. We basically just don't paskin like the opinion that Brisa. Rabbi Yochanan paskins like a Rebbe. Rebbe says, same idea. If you leave your sukkah for a significant amount of time, or you go and do something else, and you want to reestablish a meal there, you make a new leishei sukkah. The same way, if there's a hefsek after you take off your tefillin, you have to make a new bracha on your tefillin. That's the opinion we paskin like. We don't paskin like that opinion in the brisa. That's the answer. We're not reconciling it with the brisa. We just don't paskin like that opinion in the brisa. Now here's something that caught my attention. Right? We mentioned all these shechianus. Tosas also was interested in the question of shechianu. And Tosas here says at the beginning, if you look on the second Tosas on Memvav Amid Aleph, Tosas says as follows: Sarich lefarish tam mai shnad yesh mitzvah shetiknu levarich shechianu v'yesh mitzvah shelo tiknu. Right? You ever wonder? Some mitzvahs we say shechianu on, some mitzvahs we don't say shechianu on. One of the examples that Tosas gives is that we don't make a shechianu at a bris, we do make a shechianu at a pidyon haben. I don't know. If you would ask me, the bris is much more important, right? Every boy has to have a bris. Not every boy has an opinion of ben. The bris, halachically, both are deraisa, but it's much more severe. I believe there's a chiyuv kares even if one refrains from doing it. I think we discussed that in Sefer Chinuch a while back. So why is there no shechianu? So Tosos goes through a number of examples, but basically toward the end of Tosos, they say, Venira, the mitzvah sheyeshala simcha tiknu shechianu. A mitzvah that is associated with simcha, with gladness, with joy, that you make a shechianu on. Oh, so you know what? Now I can understand. Lulav, there's simcha. Sukkah, there's simcha. Bris, people are not happy parents generally are not happy when there's a bris. We only have daughters, but I've been at many bris ceremonies, and generally, the father is usually, holding it together, and many times the mother is not holding it well together, and understandably so. So the bris is not exactly. We try to make it a happy time, but I think we learned this in Sefer Chinuch. We talked about why being the kfat, sorry, not the kfat, I forget what my terms over here. The Sadik. Why being the Sadik is such a special thing. Like you think like you just sit there passively, just put the kid on the table already. So the Sadik's job, the reason that it's supposed to have a Riches Yamim is because the job of the Sadik is that he's supposed to be reassuring the parents. It's funny, many times we get like the Sadik who's like kind of nervous himself and doesn't even know what's going on. But the job of the Sadik is like, don't worry, I have your baby, he's in good hands, everything will be fine. Instead, they rely on like maybe the rabbi or the mohel, right? The mohel cracks the same jokes every time. You ever notice like it's the same routine? Here's my instruments. You could appoint me as your shliach, or here it is, and you could do it yourself. And everyone's like, "Oh, it's so funny," right? You ever notice it's like the same shtick? I guess I've been to enough of these, so it's like the same shtick each time. But then Tosos says that Rav Shrira Gaon says, "Dulo samchanol de maskina verik b'chol ma'arvin." No, the key criterion for determining when we say shechianu and when we don't is something that occurs from time to time, like on Yontif, right? Sukkot comes around every year on Sukkot, and the mitzvah lulav as well. That's when we say Shechianu, and that's what it sounds like from the lashon of the bracha, right? That God sustained us that we can live to practice another sukkahs. The issue is, Tosa says, Ukashim opinion ben. If that's your criterion for determining it, well, opinion ben is not something that comes around. In fact, it may never happen in your lifetime that you have any children that qualify for opinion ben. So why?
If you have
So
10 kids, you're only going to have one pidyon event.
but even still, like it has to be
That's
a
what I'm saying. It's so
who's a
special
male,
that
who
yeah,
right. Oh, right, you're right. And even if you do have a opinion ben, it happens once, and that's it.
yeah.
So I mean, I guess in theory, back in a polygamous society, if you then had or not, I guess it's not polygamous, I guess divorce and have a firstborn with the other mother, yeah, but again, but that wouldn't qualify for Shechianu. So Rosh Gaon's reasoning, at least as a sole criterion, is not good enough. Though I think there's a chew of the rush, and there's probably one of the answers is that there's more than one criterion. There's probably criteria which we use for determining when to use a shechianu, and so the answer lies somewhere in between. All right, so I thought that was
There's
cool
also a sakana. There's a sakana issue possibly with a bris.
with the bris, right?
Yeah.
A sakana, and even without the sakana, it's just this tsar. I mean, the kid is getting it's a mini surgery, and the parents are busy fainting. I've been to a bris or two where the mother just had to run out of the room. It's not fun. All right. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the Gemara, and we're already like a quarter way or third way down. So we'll end right there, and we'll pick it up, God willing, next week. Hopefully, same time, same place. All right. Wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Good
care.
Shabbos.